Voice of the Jets, Bob Wischusen with Armin and Levac on 104.5 The Team. Levac out today. And Bob, I know you get this a lot on you're very vocal, or you're very active on Twitter at ESPN Bob. So I know that you got this from the fans as well. The overwhelming phone calls that we got was that it's a blessing in disguise that Geno Smith got hurt because Ryan Fitzpatrick is so much better than Geno Smith. Do you err on that side as well?
No. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick's 20 games below 500 in his career as an NFL starter. I think last year when he got hurt, the Texans were 6-6, and I believe that's the only time in his career that he ended a season where his team was 500 or better. So, as good as he's played so far in the preseason, and I think the Jets at least have hopes that they've surrounded him with an offense where he can succeed. To think that someone would be rooting for the quarterback who spent the entire offseason and the first portion of training camp as the unquestioned starter to get hurt so that a backup quarterback 20 games below 500 could take over is, to me, a little short-sighted. And it's kind of, to me, that age-old, fan reaction of the favorite guy on any team is the backup quarterback.
Yep.
I mean, that's the most popular guy on football teams, the backup quarterback. And then when the backup quarterback gets in there, usually the fans realize why he was the backup quarterback. And so I'm not saying Geno Smith's even going to get his job back, because I think he and Ryan Fitzpatrick are almost on even footing in terms of what they've accomplished in the NFL. I mean, Geno's accomplished nothing in his first 2 years, but I think they still think that there's potential in him, given a system that better suits him and weapons that he probably will have much more success with than the guys he played with his first 2 years.
Do you think Ryan Fitzpatrick will play well enough to keep the starting job this season?
We'll see. I mean, Geno will be back probably either week 3 or week 4. We'll see what the Jets look like week 3 or week 4. Their first 4 games include a Monday night game in Indianapolis, a trip to London to play the Dolphins. They pretty much have about as must a win as a must-win can be on opening day against Cleveland, because Cleveland obviously is a team that struggled last year as well. They don't have any accomplishment at quarterback also, and the game's here. It's in New York. If they lose on opening day, then they could be setting themselves up for, easily a 1-3 potential start. And if that is the case, well, I would think that there'd probably be a very good chance that Geno Smith would be the starter once he was healthy enough. But, the problem for the Jets is that all of the speculation is all centered around what people anticipate will be poor quarterback play. And poor quarterback play has haunted them for years. It's usually what keeps teams from winning in the NFL. It's kept them from winning. And, they're again in that position of trying to carve out a team around a guy, whether it be Ryan Fitzpatrick or Geno, that has never proven that he can win on this level. The teams that win have winning quarterback play. And, that's kind of the proven foundation of most teams that are contenders in the NFL.
Bob Wischusen, voice of the Jets, with Armin and Levac on 104.5 The Team. Bob, it was kind of weird when Geno did get punched in the jaw by IKN and Paulie. The reaction from the teammates, not as many, they were not vocal necessarily in response of Geno. The majority, the feeling was, yeah, Geno messed up. Was Geno Smith exposed a little bit publicly as far as to what his role is or what he's lacking in the locker room with this incident that happened?
I don't know. I mean, to me, there were unnamed players that had things to say that contradicted what other unnamed players said. So it was a closed locker room. There were no media members in there. I've heard that, the same media members that wrote articles or went on talk shows saying that there was this nose-to-nose confrontation and Geno Smith stuck a finger in IKN and Polly's face, that's 100% not true. So because I'm hearing almost 180-degree polar opposite explanations of what happened, I wouldn't even want to speculate on what happened because players didn't run to Geno's defense. I don't know what happened in that locker room. So, to me, it's one of those situations that happens probably way more often than people realize. It just, this time, A, happened in New York, and B, involved the quarterback. But, I mean, fights or disagreements or arguments between players, far more publicized now, far more probably transparent now, and this time it involved a player who everyone knows who he is.
Bob Wischusen, voice of the Jets with Armin and Levac. The Jets kick off the season against the Browns Sunday at 1 o'clock. We're your home for Jets football. We have a conflict. We'll be playing that game on Q103. You can hear Jets, Browns, and this man right here, Bob Wischusen. What's the biggest difference with this Todd Bowles team that you see this year with the Jets, Bob?
Well, I mean, he's from the Parcellsian tree. He's really a no-nonsense guy. I don't want to say that Rex Ryan was not a taskmaster. I mean, he certainly put his team, through the gauntlet at times. But Rex was more of a smile on his face, throw an arm around a player, put on one of the fluorescent-colored socks on your head and run down on special teams and practice and kind of keep it a little more lighthearted. With Todd Bowles, there's none of that. I mean, none. It is a coach's dictatorial practice and that type of an air around the team. And, all right, you know what? You guys commit 5 penalties in practice, shut up, get on the line, and run. And Rex had moments like that. I mean, I remember being up in Cortland where there were 2 training camp, during practice fights that involved more than just a couple of players that had to be separated. Scrums that involved 5, 10, 12 players, a lot of pushing and shoving back and forth. And he had his whole team line up on the sideline and just run gassers and then yelled at them for that being, even possible. So I think Rex took them to the woodshed when he needed to as well. But Todd Bowles doesn't even not only hesitate to do that, but doesn't even have any of that kind of big smile on his face, lighthearted camaraderie moments that seem to follow Rex in training camp. He's much more of just an old school, I'm the coach, you're the player, shut up and listen type air about him. And I think he's going to try to remake this roster with guys that almost want to be around that type of an atmosphere. Just I don't care about anything else. Just go win.
You kind of feel like that's what this team needed in a way, Bob?
Well, it always flip-flops. And this goes back with any regime that changes coaches. I mean, if you look at the Jets just in a microcosm, they had Rich Kotite, who could not have been easier on the players, and played golf at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And then, they, of course, have those 2 terrible seasons. They bring in Bill Parcells. Well, what is Bill Parcells? Bill Parcells is about as old school a shut-up-and-listen coach as there is. He was there for 4 years, 3 years with Al Groh. His disciple was 1 year there. Then they hire Herm Edwards, who was more of a player's coach. I mean, obviously, Herm, being a former player himself, they called the training camps Club Herm. He just didn't push them as hard as maybe Bill Parcells pushed them. So when they flipped from Herm Edwards to a new coach, who did they hire? Eric Mangini. Well, Eric Mangini comes from the Parcells Belichick tree of hammering you guys with 2.5-hour practices. He's there for 3 years. They get rid of Eric. Who do they hire? Rex, who's got a big smile on his face. Now they get rid of Rex. Who do they hire? Todd Bowles, who was back in the other direction. So I mean, it's every single time a coach is hired or fired, usually in pro sports, they are replaced by what they are not, because the owner now thinks that that's going to be what's going to solve the problem, when really it's talent. I mean, get good players. In any sport, 99% of the time, when you're looking at the playoffs, maybe not the team that wins the championship, but at least the teams that are in the playoffs, you're going to tick off all the great players they've got on their roster. And usually when coaches get fired, a coach will get fired in the NFL in January, a new coach will get hired in February, and then between March and April and May, what happens to the roster? I mean, very rarely is the message sent that the biggest problem was our coach, and as long as we have a coach, we've got a winning team. And they don't change the roster. They just get a new coach and bring back all the same old players. Well, teams don't do that. 99% of the time, they fire the coach, hire a new coach, and then go out and get a whole bunch of new players, either via the draft or a lot of times through free agency. And the Jets are no different. The Jets have 15 new players back on this, either guys that used to be here that they brought back or guys they brought in for the first time that should be major contributors this year. And so if Rex Ryan was given Antonio Cromartie and Darrelle Revis and Brandon Marshall and Leonard Williams and he would have had a much better team this year than they had last year, too. But, I think hiring and firing of coaches often is window dressing to going out and doing what you have to do, which is make your team better by getting better players.
Bob Wischusen, voice of the Jets. So how good are the Jets this year? Could they win the NFC East?
I guess I started off the conversation talking about quarterback play. Well, who's got the best quarterback in the division, and now who's going to have their quarterback for all 16 games?
Yeah.
It appears. So, to me, the three teams that are chasing the Patriots in this division are all chasing them the same way, trying to bolster their defense, bolster their skill guys, spend a lot of money making their team better everywhere that they possibly can around the fact that they don't have Tom Brady playing quarterback. So as long as Tom Brady is the quarterback in New England, I think anyone's going to have a hard time picking any of the other three teams to win the division. I think a realistic goal would be if you get off to a good start and you win the winnable games, especially at home, you should get to December in a wild card race. And then we'll see how healthy you are, how well the quarterback's playing. Did you need to make a quarterback switch? If a couple of the bounces of the ball go your way. And, maybe you're playing games in December that are important in terms of a playoff race that still remains. I would say that that's probably a realistic hope for this team. If they play really well, could they win 10 games? Yeah, if they play really, really well and everything goes their way, they certainly are capable of winning 10 games. But 10 games might not even be enough to win the division because the Patriots usually win 11 or 12.
Bob Wischusen, voice of the Jets, at ESPN Bob on Twitter. Jets-Browns kickoff 1 o'clock this Sunday. We'll be heard on Q103 right here on your home for Jets football. Bob, what's the matchup? What's the aspect of Jets-Browns this Sunday that you'll be keeping an eye on?
Oh, well, it's definitely, the Jet defense, especially the front seven, stopping the run and forcing Josh McCown to beat them. You've got Antonio Cromartie, Darrelle Revis, and Buster Screen. All three guys, I think they're comfortable with putting them in bump and run man-to-man coverage. And they should be able to, even without Sheldon Richardson, if Leonard Williams, is healthy and is what we think he can be, they should be good enough to control the line of scrimmage and put McCown in a situation where he's throwing against the Jet corners. And if the Jets take the ball away a couple of times, they obviously should have a chance to win. So to me, for the offense, it's just about don't give the game away. That's always been the bugaboo for the Jets. Don't turn it over. Don't hand the team free points. Don't keep them in a game. Really, of the four groups, Jet offense, Jet defense, Browns offense, Brown defense, the best singular unit on the field by far should be the Jet defense. And if you play to that strength and don't make mistakes and turn the ball over on offense, there's no reason why they shouldn't win.
Voice of the Jets, Bob Wischusen. He'll also be on the call on ESPN this Saturday, 11:30 USF at Florida State. Florida State quarterback Everett Golson, which, by the way, is still weird for me to say, did so well in his debut. Is he going to be able to follow the footsteps of Jameis Winston at Florida State? What have we seen so far from this team, Bob?
Well, it's a different kind of offense and a different kind of quarterback. Golson obviously has mobility that Jameis Winston didn't have, but he also doesn't have the background of running a pro system that Jameis Winston does, and also doesn't have the arm strength that Jameis Winston has. So, you're going to run your offense differently with Golson than you are with Winston, but he's got a running back in Dalvin Cook, to me, that is a game-changing player that, and now that he's on this team for the full season, there's no reason to think. I think he's working on 4 straight 100-yard games going back to last year. He kind of came on strong at the end of last year, and he's the number one guy now and has that combination, enough power for college football to play the power game, but also has speed. That's a Florida State level of speed. Now, I'm not going to put any stock into the win they had this past week. That was a we'll pay you, $500,000 to come here and let us beat you up game. USF, I don't know what kind of a challenge they'll put up. I haven't really dived into their roster significantly yet, but they should be, pretty well outmatched by Florida State. I have a hard time believing this is going to be a competitive game in the fourth quarter. And then you look ahead to Florida State's ACC schedule. And, it's going to get a lot tougher for FSU in the next 4 weeks.
Bob Wischusen, voice of the Jets and voice of college football and basketball right here on ESPN Radio. You hear him all the time. Bob, looking forward to this season. Thanks for being the voice right here on 104.5 The Team. Let's get it going. Let's go Jets, and we'll be in touch, my friend.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.